Well, since we are about 3 minutes after, I want to thank everybody for joining us for my book launch party. Oh my God, you guys, this book has been 7 years in the making. I mean, well, it's actually, oops, the wrong book. That's my proof copy. Hold on. This is the actual copy. This has been like 7 years in the making. I had a 5-year break, but it's really a story about my whole personal growth and transformational journey. So, it's so relieving and so cool to finally get it out there. And I'm so thrilled that you guys are here on the call to join me for this. So before we get started, I want to just acknowledge that we've got some really special guests here today. We've got Andy Fetzner, who is a trauma therapist, as well as go ahead and wave again, Andy. As well as the co-owner of Origins Training, which she trains organizations to become trauma informed. And we also have Terry Wellbrock, who is hey Terry, there she is down there. Great to see you. And she's the podcast host for the Healing Place podcast, which is like the top 2% podcast worldwide. In fact, I've got an interview she did with me that's launching today. So I'll send a link out for that too. And we have Carrie Sipp. So you can unmute Carrie, I guess. Yeah. Carrie Sipp is here also. So welcome, Carrie.
Live from Boise, Idaho.
Oh my God. Well, welcome, girlfriend. Carrie and Terry and Andy have all been key players in supporting me in this whole journey of healing trauma. And so I'm just so grateful for them, as well as all of you guys. I mean, so many people here have been on this journey with me for many years. And to have a moment in time where I can celebrate this it really is like having a baby. It's like 7 years of hard labor, and I finally had the baby, and she's beautiful and healthy, and yay. Anyway, so why did I start this book? Why did I even decide to do it? Well, the reason is I had been on my recovery journey for almost 3 decades when I read a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it was by Bessel van der Kolk. And the only reason I got the book was because I love anything related to psychology and noticed a bunch of trauma books out there and thought, okay, well, this sounds interesting. I never really thought it would apply to me, since I always thought you had to have sexual or physical abuse to be considered a trauma survivor. So I'm reading along and I'm like, oh my God, you don't have to have sexual or physical abuse to be a trauma survivor. In fact, my major trauma was growing up with an alcoholic mom who got drunk and raged at my dad for almost a decade and keeping me up at night. And and being bullied at school for being an overweight kid because I used food to cope, and then coming out as a lesbian in a Catholic high school. So I had the whole homophobic religious trauma stuff too. But I never thought that could cause a post-traumatic stress disorder called complex PTSD. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a more severe form of PTSD that typically happens over the course of many years during childhood development, when you're supposed to feel safe and nurtured, and yet you're in an environment where there's either a parent with an addiction, they suffer from severe anxiety or depression, or you're witnessing emotional abuse or physical abuse between parents, or the typical things that most people associate with trauma, physical or sexual abuse. And also parents divorcing, or witnessing a mother or parents, actually having physical violence. But since my things were not included in the typical ones, I never thought it could be me. So I'm reading this book, having epiphany after epiphany, going, oh my God, my brain had actually been changed. My nervous system had been changed, not just my psychological aspects, but the actual development of my brain had been changed to the point to where the frontal lobe part, the front part where you actually have impulse control and attention and future planning, underdeveloped because the back part, my fight, flight, freeze part, needed to overdevelop to cope with my environment. So it finally made sense. No wonder I couldn't stop eating when I was so, stressed out with my childhood. No wonder once I picked up a drink or a joint, it was like an elixir sent down from the gods. I was operating at these deficits that I didn't even know I had. And yet I had so much shame about all of this stuff because, there's a lot of shame in our culture about addiction and obesity. And, for many of you that don't know, I used to weigh over 300 pounds and struggled with severe obesity for many, many years. And it's a difficult path. And so the fact that I was able to get sober, recover from my severe obesity, keep my weight off, and be in a healthy relationship with my partner, Maria, wave Maria, is just a miracle, It could have gone terribly wrong, but it didn't. And I'm so grateful that that I'm alive to tell the story. And that I didn't want to die with, like Wayne Dyer used to always say, don't die with your music still in you. And I knew that this story could help a lot of people. And yet, until I learned I had trauma, I had too much shame about my history of addiction and obesity to share it publicly. And so that's the power of understanding that it wasn't my fault. And there is specific trauma treatments and therapies that you can heal. And then it was like, well, I don't have shame about it anymore. Of course, I'm going to share this story. In fact, I felt a moral obligation to share this story because there's so many people suffering that don't need to be suffering. And that there's so many, you do need to get specific types of trauma therapies to fully heal because the trauma lives not just emotionally, but in your body and in your nervous system. So I go into all of that stuff in the book. So anyway, that's the reason I wrote the book. And by the way, Maria did put the links, if you haven't bought the book, for the Kindle version and the paperback version in the chat. And right now the Kindle version's on sale for just $2.99. And so the thing about Amazon is that the first 3 days of a book launch have a huge impact on the long-term success of the book. So if you're at all inclined on reading it and supporting this mission, I would be so grateful. So also the other things we're going to do today, we're going to do a spin the wheel thing, which I found from another person that did a book launch where I have a virtual spin the wheel with all your names in it. So I'm excited about that. And what else? So I guess maybe what we could start with, well, let's just, for the fun of it, start with the spin the wheel process. So this is where I'm going to actually go into my screen share, and I'm gonna, and by the way, you have to be present to win these gifts that I'm giving away. So if I call a name, and why don't you unmute, Jody, because I'm gonna call a name, and I want whoever's name is present here to raise their hand or say, hey, that's me, okay? And be honest. It has to be.
I can't actually unmute them, they have to, so.
Oh, okay, good. So
Yeah.
Unmute yourself if it's you, okay? So here we go. I'm gonna where's my spin the wheel? Hold on. Okay, hold on. Let's see, just a second. There it is. Okay, so let me get back into my thing. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go to the wheel. I'm going to hit share. And so there's the wheel. Okay, everybody?
Okay.
So check this
Oh,
out.
fun.
So what we're spinning for is a $20 gift card for Amazon.com. Are you ready, everybody? Okay, here we go. Diane Yu. Is Diane Yu present? If you are present, oh, I think I see you are.
Oh, yes. Hi.
Diane, congratulations.
Oh
You
my
are
gosh,
the
okay.
winner. So you're going to get I'm going to send you an email with a $20 gift card for Amazon.com. Congratulations.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Okay. So just real quick, I don't know
Sure.
anybody I mean, I know a couple people on the thing, but I just had a life reading, and so my childhood trauma came up on it, and then this speaks to it, and I'm going to start somatic therapy tomorrow
Right
to like
on.
deal with my PTSD. I don't know what I'm in store for, but
Well,
that book that you just mentioned about the body keeps score, that was
yes.
brought up as well. So thank you
Oh, well, you're
for
welcome.
your
That's,
work. And yeah, okay,
well,
hi.
that's the perfect,
Sorry.
yeah, that's the perfect kind of therapy to get into. So congratulations.
Okay,
All
well,
right.
anyway, but okay, thank you.
Yeah, isn't that cool, that spin the wheel thing? Okay, so now we're gonna bring on my first special guest, which is the one and the only Carrie Sipp, who is from the PACES Connection, which is positive. Well, you can go ahead and share what PACES Connection is and what your role there is and what your role is in the childhood trauma field. Okay, Carrie?
Well, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, good. I just got to say, it is so nice to see so many faces that I haven't seen in a while, to see Andy Fetzner and Terry Welbrock, and wow, and there's a little puppy in Jody Puttiker's grasp there. That's so sweet. But I'm Carrie Sipp, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for PACES Connection. But that has something to do with the fact that Mary and I know each other only because I met her when I was working at PACES Connection. So helping on her book launch was not a strategic partnership for PACES Connection, but it was a strategic partnership because we sure did start 3 years ago.
Mhm.
We intentionally work together. This time 3 years ago, I was in a not good place, and I loved Mary because Mary always makes me laugh and makes me think that I could be a stand-up comedian, which that's not going to happen. But we decided that we would coach each other, and we did an exchange. And so she helped me with some personal development, and I would listen to her book, and she would read it to me. And I say, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? But for those, does everybody know what PACES Connection is?
Probably not.
Okay. All right. We're gonna play trauma informed here, and start from the belief that everybody needs to know what we're talking about.
Okay.
That's what we would do with healing centers. So PACES Connection is a website and a social network community where we have a Library of Congress and a Wikipedia of this on the science of positive and adverse childhood experiences, which Mary and I speak a lot about. And it is filled with wonderful resources and up-to-date news that we post, and 440 geographic communities. You can find your community on there, that we support the geographic communities and some special interest communities, such as the LGBTQIA community, and communities of faith, and medical students and nurses, and people
Addiction and recovery communities.
Addiction and recovery community. And so we're really the resource and the great place to connect. Like Andy Fetzner and I met each other at when Mary and I met face to face, the 2018 ACEs conference in San Francisco. Of course, then it was ACEs for adverse childhood experiences, but we changed in 2020 to be PACES Connection, which I love, to add in the science of positive childhood experiences, because as Mary and I, and maybe some of you as well, did have developmental trauma, which made, the emotional part of our brain, it's so true. What we think about, we bring about, and what gets attention keeps getting attention. And so because our little amygdalas were on 4-star, 5-star fire alarm alert, because I grew up in the same kind of, not the exact same thing, but much the same kind of chaos, we think of ourselves as having developmental trauma, but anyway, we connected over that and many other things when we met live and in person in San Francisco 5 years ago.
That's
almost.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, so for you, Carrie, how would you say just the topics of the book are areas that you could relate to, or that could be helpful for people that might not know they have trauma or that sort of thing?
Well, you know, Mary, as you and I've talked about, I've been in recovery for 28 years. And I started after I got a hold of the ACEs study, the 1998 ACEs study in about 2000, when I started to synthesize all of this really well.
Could you, we're really quick, but can you say what the ACEs, I mean, just briefly
Sure.
what the, because not everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, no, you're so smart. It's the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study published by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente in 1998. And it was primary investigators were Dr. Vincent Folletti and Dr. Robert Anda, and they had a group of more than 17,000 Kaiser Permanente patients who were asked many, many questions, in addition to, woven into those questions, the 10 that Mary mentioned about physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, if your family had someone who was an alcoholic or an addict, or if you witnessed domestic violence with your father against your mother. They didn't say anything then about the mother against the father.
Which is what I experienced watching my mother kind of beat up my dad a bit. Not super much, but yeah, she did. Yeah.
Well, the verbal abuse, I mean,
Yeah.
it's all what I call toxic intensity. Or if there was mental illness in the house, which God knows, you know, depression, as Jane Stevens, our beloved founder of PACES Connection, said, you know, these ACEs rarely go one at a time. They're usually 2 or 3 or 4 together, because if there is addiction, the codependent person is going to probably be depressed, and you know, eventually violence is likely to erupt, whether it's between the two adults, or the child ends up getting the violence because the boogie's innocent, it's going to come out. So at any rate, the study found that adverse childhood experiences were very common, and that even though the people who were studied in that study were probably mostly middle class, mostly college educated because they had insurance, right? That the ACEs were very prevalent, and that there was a dose-specific response to what happened with respect to the adult health of these people. That if you had 3 or more ACEs, you were more likely to have heart disease, cancer, COPD, you know, lung issues, chronic pain. If you had 4 things,
like,
really,
yeah, and like I talk about that in the book too. I mean, just, and I'm not to interrupt, but just because we're almost,
we got to move it along, and I know I'm going too deep.
No, but the whole point is that I have an ACE score of 6 out of 10, which is a very high score, and I show in my book literally graphs of how my ACE score predicted my future. I had a 700% higher chance of becoming an alcoholic, which I became, like a 100% chance higher of having drug issues, obesity, smoking, work problems, financial problem, all these problems. But the good news about ACEs, I like to mention, is it can seem like doom and gloom when you first look at it. But the truth is that if you can get the right interventions as early as possible, like I got sober when I was 27, I, you know, got into recovery with my relationships. And so you can mitigate them. So it's not like, you know, you're screwed, and you know, you really, I'm an example of that, and Carrie, and many of us on this call are. So I don't mean to interrupt, Terry, but I wanted to also, bring on our next person too, because we have 2 more people.
Right.
So, well, and I want to say thank you, Carrie. We had our weekly calls, and literally, I remember you would at the end of the call, you're like, okay, I'm going to lay down and I want you to read me a chapter. So she would lay down and I'd read her a little chapter in my book and she'd give me feedback. And it was so
dear. It was like story
godsend.
time. It was so dear. I
Yeah.
cherished that. It was very, very wonderful. And it was a
Yeah.
positive adult experience. So
Yeah.
Mary, I'm so proud of you. And I just
Thank you.
cannot say enough how much I hope you get on Oprah, because you've promised to take me with you. So anyway.
Oh, I know. I'm working on Oprah next. Don't worry.
Okay, I know, not to worry. If anybody can network up the chain, you are going to do it, girlfriend. I
Just
know
so you know, I put Robin Roberts on my email list and she opened it. Just so I know.
Okay. We're sending you
We're
positive
working.
energy.
I'm working it.
We're
Okay.
working it too.
So-
Thank you. And I'll put the link to Pace's Connection in the chat so y'all
Please,
can
please
join.
do.
It's free to
Yes.
join, and it's wonderful to get great
Yeah.
information.
If you guys want to learn about childhood trauma on a really cool level, these are all professionals that are either therapists or social workers or nurses or people like me, a coach. And it's the safest, it's like the safest community. And this is a big reason why I've been able to write this book, because I've connected with Carrie, with Terry, with Andy, so many friends that are safe, that get it, that aren't going to shame you for your, weirdnesses that most of us with trauma have. So, okay. So next, thank you, Carrie. I so appreciate you being here. You're the best. Okay. So now it's time to spin the wheel again. So are we ready? Okay. So hold on. I'm going to share my screen, bring up my wheel and share it. And here we go. Cross your fingers. Yale. Is Yale on the call? I don't know if Yale is on the call. Let's see. Do we see a Yale anywhere? Okay, Yale. If you're there, you better unmute, because I'm going to have to spin it again. Okay. Let's do it again then. Leah. Do we have a Leah on the call? No Leah? Wait. Don't, actually, we can see in participants. Hey, Jody, maybe you can look in participants.
Yeah,
if you wouldn't
no,
mind.
Leah, I'm
Okay,
looking.
thank you. Okay, good. All
I
right,
love this.
Leah.
I love this spinner. This is really cool.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do it again.
Oh, Pat. Yes, Pat H seems to be here. Yes.
Pat, come forward. Claim your prize. Do we see a Pat?
I am asking.
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you Pat with Jeffrey?
Oh, wait a second. I don't know which Pat you mean.
Why don't you unshare your screen, Mary? Unshare your
Oh,
screen.
I'm sorry. Yes. What's your last name?
Mine is Hill.
Yeah. Oh, Patty. Oh
Yes.
my God. This is my partner Maria's sister. Awesome. Congratulations, Patty.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. Well, you have won a $20 Amazon gift card, girlfriend.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Nat, be careful driving. She's driving from California back to LA and has it on.
Okay, be careful.
I just pulled into my house. So I'm trying to figure out how to take myself off so I can go in.
Congrats,
Okay.
Nat.
Yeah, Patty is Maria's sister, older sister. So yay, Patty. All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we've got the Paces Connection link in the chat. We also have the link for the ebook. the Kindle, which is only $2.99. It's a killer deal. And actually, just to put it out there, I do need more reviews on Kindle. I thank God I've got about 5 on the paperback, but I think just 1 on Kindle. So if you want to,
Mary,
yes.
anyway, this is Joy. I just went to go get the Kindle and I keep only finding the paperback. So I don't know
Oh,
if you know that.
yeah, it's a special link. Okay, so there's a special link for the Kindle.
I can redo that. Otherwise, just scroll down and it should be below it. But
Yeah, what
otherwise
you
I'll
do is,
resend the link.
yeah, it's definitely, it right
I mean,
now,
usually
they're
Kindle
not linked
shows up.
together. Yes, they're not linked together yet because they're so new. But
Oh.
yeah, but it's there. So
Well, I looked and looked, but maybe I have to look more. I don't know. But
yeah,
anyway,
Maria, could you handle that, please?
I will.
Thank
All right.
you, dear. All
sorry,
right.
just
No
thought you'd know.
problem. No, thank you for letting me know. Okay, so now we have our next special guest. It's the one and the only Terry Wellbrock, trauma warrior, and she is the host of the Healing Place podcast, which is, I met her through Faces Connection too. So,
Yes.
And so why don't you introduce yourself and what you're up to? So, because I think you can do a better job of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited. I've been telling you, I feel like the auntie, and today is like, the birth of the baby, and I'm so excited. So, I'm truly like all day I've been walking around going, oh my God, it's here.
Yay.
So yeah, Mary and I met through Paces Connection. I'm a member of Paces Connection, and what a great community. I know when I first came across it, I was still in the growing stages of the Healing Place podcast, and would put posts out about interviews I'd done. Well, I started having people from that community reach out to me and want to be on the show, which was just another great way to build this network of support for trauma warriors, whether you're someone who's a survivor or an advocate in helping survivors, or both, which is me and Mary. So yeah, I think we did meet through Paces Connection. I had you on the show, and then when the pandemic hit, I did a pandemic self-care series, Facebook Live, and you were gracious enough to come back with 35 other podcast guests and join me on that series, which was wonderful, and talk about self-care. And now today we've just put out a 3rd interview. So if you go to the Healing Place podcast, which I sent Mary all the links, you can watch that amazing interview. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, so how would you describe maybe what you read in the book and how it applies to what you've learned about trauma or your life or that sort of thing?
Sure, thanks. So one of the things that I just think was so amazing on our weekly calls, because I loved our Wednesday at 3:00 or my time phone calls, was that I have a 10 out of 10 ACEs score. Horrific trauma my first 22 years of my life, from bank robberies and murder and sexual abuse and you name it, it happened. It was horrible. And I had just floundered my way through life until 2013, when I found my way onto the healing path and EMDR therapy. But during our calls, what I learned, because I too was of this mentality, even though I had learned a lot about trauma, that there was these big T's and little T's and my super big traumas, but you highlighting that trauma can be about the neglect part of it, and what a huge impact
Emotional
that has.
neglect. Yeah.
Yes, that has on children. And and so I just think there is just huge number of people out there who just think, oh, well, I don't have it as bad as somebody else. And I've had people literally say that to me when they hear my story. Oh, well, mine, I don't think mine was that bad. And I've always said, trauma is trauma. It's not a trauma race. And so you highlighting another way to look at trauma was eye-opening for me, but it's
Mhm.
it's so needed in this world. It is so needed. And so that was a big part of it. And then the other thing is that, and I've told you over and over, this book is so amazing as a teaching memoir because it's interwoven beautifully with your stories of triumph over trauma, along with jam-packed scientific information to back up what you're saying. And that's powerful, powerful stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I was really blown away about the emotional neglect piece too, because I remember reading an article by Jonice Webb, who's an expert with childhood emotional neglect, and I'm like, I've never really heard of that term, childhood emotional neglect, And basically, what it is when you have a parent that just doesn't have the capacity to validate your emotions, to make them less important than other things, and typically parents that don't have that capacity, it's not because they're, bad people or whatever, it's because their parents weren't able to do it for them. And the problem with it is since it's something that was supposed to happen but didn't happen, it goes underground and invisible, because how would you know what was missing if you didn't even know it was supposed to be there in the first place, And so then you wonder, okay, so like people that don't have, didn't have an alcoholic parent, didn't have a violent home or whatever, but then they wonder why they're depressed, or what they wonder why they don't feel connected in their relationships, or can't seem to, maintain a long-term or a fulfilling relationship, or why they feel kind of dead inside, and it typically stems from childhood emotional neglect. In fact, Robin Williams, Gabor Mate talks about this. He's another trauma therapist or trauma author. Robin Williams, that was his major trauma. He was raised with two very successful parents, but his parents were always working, and he was raised by nannies. And so he was an only child. And so he never really got that kind of attunement and that mirroring, that connection that we need as a human being. And we not only need it as a human being, but we need it from cradle to grave. And so, that's why it feels so good when, you're with somebody and you feel so seen and gotten. There's something so calming and safe about that. And when you don't get it, you can't help but feel unsafe and anxious. And, what do we do with those feelings? Well, I ate, I drank, I smoked. Some people work, some people do other things, but anyway, yes, emotional neglect was a key piece. What else, Tara? Yeah.
Oh gosh, I was sitting here thinking, I was so listening to what you were saying, it popped out of my head. So now I'm like,
That's okay.
Well, I just think, again, there's just such a need for what you are talking about that I hadn't come across yet, because like you, I'm that researcher. Once I stepped onto the healing path and started down that healing journey and started utilizing somatic healing, EMDR therapy, and tapping, and just again, you talk about a lot of this in your book as ways that people can heal their trauma. And anyway, I lost my thought again. It went out of my head. So I just I'm just very proud of you for putting this much needed resource out and talking about a subject. That's what I was saying, is that you, in all of my research, I hadn't come across anything yet in reading all of the trauma books and listening to trauma podcasts and so forth, and in all my interviews, directly addressing the addiction piece of it, combined with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's really needed, and just great job.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that was the reason it took me 30 years to link my addiction. And I mean, I knew my addictions and my food stuff had to do with my psychological aspects of my childhood, but I didn't know that they were a post-traumatic nervous system response, that unless I got specific types of therapies, that would continue for the rest of my life. And so it's sort of like expecting a brain, like somebody with a traumatic brain injury to just kind of get over it. It's like, no, you need special types of treatments and therapy. And excuse me, in my case, another thing that I didn't know was emotional neglect was when my mom would go on her drunken tirades and everything, there was no one there to soothe me afterwards, like the next day. My dad or her never said, "Oh, honey, I know it was a rough night. How are you doing?" There was none of that. So that's emotional neglect, just not being there for somebody that's gone through an emotionally upsetting experience. And then also neglecting to, I was out getting drunk and loaded every night from the time I was 17 till I moved out. And they were so caught up in their own drama and their marriage and my mom's drinking that, they didn't call me out on that because it was just too much of other things going on. So they didn't protect me from that. And again, this is not, I want to mention one thing that's important. This is not about blaming parents. This is about recognizing why we may struggle in the ways we do so we can get the right treatment to heal. Parents do the best they can and typically do how they parent the way they were parented. And it's not to minimize what happened to you, but the point is that we can't heal what we don't acknowledge. And so that's why it's so important to understand how the brain, body, and mind gets changed from these things and why you may be struggling in your adulthood. And, the biggest thing I think emotional neglect affects is intimate relationships. When you don't have that mirroring, attuned parent as a young child, you really miss out on that developmental stage of being able to do that with other people. And that's where intimacy and connection lives. And so, and I think that's a whole other book that could be written. So anyway, thank you again, Terry. You've been a godsend, and you and Terry have been my two people that have just been with me throughout the whole journey. So, and this is an example that I talk about in the book too, is it's so important to surround yourself with supportive, safe people. So of course, my partner Maria is the safest one out there. She's been with me through this whole journey, and she's, learned more and listened to more about childhood trauma than she ever wanted to learn, but she listened patiently. Anyway, okay. So let's see, now we are at 6:40. So it's time to spin the wheel again. So let's do it. This is our last spin, you guys. So here we go. Let's see, screen share. There it is. Okay. All right. Okay. Think positive thoughts. You are a winner. Ooh. Cheryl. Right on. Awesome, Cheryl. Congratulations.
Cheryl.
Wow, I love it. Cheryl's a new friend of mine, and I'm so thrilled that you won. So congratulations. And Cheryl's a trauma therapist and knows a lot about this stuff. So thank you for being here, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. We're going to have a Q&A, by the way, at the end. So we can all chime in a few minutes. But before then, I just wanted to bring on my next guest, who is Andy Fetzner. And Andy, again, I met through the PACES Connection. She runs the Los Angeles community. And so I'd like her to actually maybe, share a little bit about her background in trauma and we could talk about everything else. Go, Andy.
Hi, we can talk about everything else. I love
That's
that.
right.
I mean, that's part of why this community is so wonderful. And I love that we're talking about community. We're talking about the healing process. We're talking about the hope component of trauma. I think that's the part that gets lost so often when we talk about these big, heavy topics is a lot of people can think, oh, we're wallowing or, we're blaming parents. No, it's understanding what happened, so not that we can get to the root of the struggle and stop, as you so eloquently put it in one of our first meetings, start seeing those behaviors as solutions, whether it's substances or relationships or food or shopping or gambling or a myriad of other things. So I'll introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Fetzner. I am a member of the Paces Connection. I am a co-founder of Origins Training. We work to support organizations who are aiming to be integrating of trauma-informed approaches into their practices. We work a lot in healthcare through the ACEs Aware Initiative. We also work with the with a cross sector, because a trauma-informed approach can be applied anywhere, and we hope that it will be applied anywhere so that we can create stable, safe environments where people can learn, people can work, people can heal.
Really quick, would you mind sharing what trauma-informed is? Because I don't think everybody knows that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've done I think a pretty amazing job of being trauma-informed in this time together so far. A trauma-informed approach aims to address and acknowledge the impact of a person's life experiences and how they show up today in behaviors, thoughts, emotions, and in our physiology in our bodies. So when we put our trauma-informed lenses on, we're kind of seeing a person, the whole person as they show up. We are seeing them as they have experienced their whole lives, and we are trying to create safety so that that stress response gets calmed down, and so that they can show up in a way that is the most authentic version of themselves, whether that be at work, at school, or in a setting like this where we're all here to connect. And when we can create that safety through creating shared languages, creating a shared understanding, creating agreements as to how we are going to interact with one another in a space. All of those are just things that I like to say we can sprinkle in to create trauma-informed spaces. And then I think specifically with the work that and some of the traumatic components that don't always get acknowledged, Mary, that you've identified, environments that are homophobic, environments that are punitive, and that are perpetuating intergenerational historical traumas around race, culture, and marginalization. Those spaces are the ones that I hope to disrupt as much as possible, and get in there and sprinkle in this trauma-informed stuff, this trauma-informed language.
Really quick, what you do reminds me of Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey's book titled What Happened to You?
Right.
So the trauma-informed approach, in sort of a nutshell, is you look at someone not as what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Right, absolutely. And that was the most impactful thing, I think, when I first learned about the ACE study, now that we all are on board and kind of like that language, right? So was understanding and being able to peel back those layers of like, oh my gosh, I look around the room, and I was in a training. I learned about it when I was in a training my last year of my master's program to be a counselor. And I was like, I knew all the diagnoses, I knew all the what's wrong stuff, but this training was on trauma-informed and ACEs, and it was people who had been in the field for a long time and people who were students like myself. We took the ACE survey, and our hands were going up as the instructor asked, how many ACEs do you have? And I was like, wow, there's a lot of us here that have experienced adversity, and how does that show up for us as we show up for others and as we aim to show up for other people?
Right.
And that's really why I help the helper, and why my goal is to work in systems, because I think there are a lot of people unintentionally doing harm, unintentionally perpetuating their own trauma, repeating their own traumas.
Right.
And I think your book does an exceptional job of humanizing, putting language to, threading concepts that aren't necessarily connected in other literature.
Mhm.
in a way that's approachable. And
Good.
and yeah, I'm just so excited to be here and so grateful that you have birthed this upon
Yes.
us, and that you're playing your music,
Yes, I'm sharing my music with the world.
sharing
Well,
music.
thank you. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. It wasn't until I had a new narrative about why I had struggled with the severe obesity and the addictions and the shame that I was able to let go of the shame to where I can share this now. So that's the power of, like of learning about trauma. And it's not about being a victim. It's about understanding what happened to you so you can heal.
Yeah, and
Yep.
heal people. That's
Right.
what I see in the chat, Carrie. Hurt people, and heal people. And that's what we're
Exactly.
here to do. We're here to share, I think, the vulnerability and share our own experiences. That was one of the main things in my internship. I went toe to toe with my internship director who wanted to get into power struggles with teenagers over curse words who were suicidal. And I'm like, maybe we should prioritize and not,
Yeah.
maybe you need to explore your own hangups about using nice language or
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
your deal is. So yeah, heal people. Love that.
So Carrie, I hear that do you still have a hand up? Carrie Sip?
Yeah, because I wanted to circle back because I never closed that loop. I'm running on about 5 hours of sleep here, but I said that in meetings, in different recovery meetings, I would, when I was a speaker, I would ask people to close their eyes to keep the anonymity there. But I would ask, how many people in this meeting, whichever type of meeting it was, grew up in addiction or abuse? And hands would shoot up in these meetings. And then I'd say, okay, now take your hands down and everybody, you can open your eyes now. And I'll just say, y'all, that, I'm not perfect on this guesswork here, but it looked like about 70% of us sitting in these seats in this room to deal with this issue grew
Whether
up.
it's addiction or food or whatever the 12-step meeting is, right?
Whatever it is, grew up in this because we all have this gaping, yawing hole that could be either the emotional neglect or the physical neglect or the physical abuse or whatever. And we're always trying to fill that. And, the sweetness of life, we love sweets because we're missing the sweetness of life. And the recovery work that you talk about, Mary, helps us center and get that. And that's what the book really brings home is there's hope, there's healing, there's science, there is community, there is love, and there are possibilities, endless possibilities. Many of us here who have high scores, more than 6, I'm a 9, we're supposed to die. According to the science, many of us will have our lives cut short by 20 years. So I realized I was living on borrowed time a while back. So we got to make the most of this. And we did get buffered by some good things. And this is a good thing. So thanks for letting me share that and close that loop.
Well, thank you. And I do like the thing about the 20-year, I know there's science on that about people with high ACE scores can die 20 years sooner. And my feeling about that is it's people that have not mitigated their high risk coping behaviors like drinking, smoking, being overweight, being in stressful relationships. So the point is that I did all of those things and I plan on living to 100 or more. So I really do believe that we can heal and go on, and there's a lot of hope. So anyway. All right. So, by the way, did we get the Kindle link to work in the chat, hon? Or was it Hope? Or who was the person that was asking about that? I don't know. Well, anyway, if not,
I did relink it. I hope it's working.
Okay, good.
If not.
Okay, let us know. Yeah, and so let's see, where are we now? So that was Andy. Thank you so much, Andy and Carrie and Terry. So we have some time now for some Q&A. Who would like to just shoot some questions out or comments or whatever you'd like? Terry.
Hi, I'm back with my brain back intact. So my mom was moved to hospice and I'm just so frazzled. Like I just feel like my brain's frazzled today. So I apologize if I was like stumbling all over myself, but can you talk a little bit about the resilience part of it? I know we talked about it on the podcast, which everyone can go listen to, but I know that #OneCaringAdult, that I think that also can speak to that 20 years, right? Because I know for me, oh my gosh, my grandma Kitty, she was a saving grace in my life. My sister and I talk often about we're so shocked we're as sane as we are coming from what we came out of.
Right.
And so yeah, we
Yes.
certainly credit her.
So yeah, resilience was an interesting term when I first learned about trauma, because I'm like, why do they keep on talking about resilience? This is like really weird to me. I just thought it was odd, because to me, resilience is like, okay, you're hardy, you bounce back or whatever. Well, in the trauma world, resilience in the trauma speak, if you will, is how well your nervous system manages stress. So when you have a lot of trauma in your background, your nervous system does not develop like a person that doesn't. And so you tend to get activated easier, you get emotionally upset easier, you stay upset longer. And of course, you need to medicate those things. And so that's where all the food, drugs, alcohol, relationship problems come in. But building resilience is a big part of healing trauma. And so I didn't realize it until I learned about trauma, but a big part of my personal development and my recovery was all about building resilience. And I would say that one of the biggest pieces is prioritizing healthy relationships. I mean, being able to tap into a network of people that you feel safe with is absolutely key. And if you don't feel safe with one-on-one relationships, go to groups. 12-step groups, you can share and not be interrupted. Or if you're not even safe with that, go to a therapist, go to a coach, or go to an online meeting. But the whole point of, trauma, the essence of trauma is feeling disconnected from yourself and others. And the resilience building is learning how to safely reconnect with yourself and others. Also, building resilience is, there's a lot of different things you can do as far as the different therapies, EMDR, neurofeedback. But basically, it's like building a muscle. It's like you have to expose yourself to a certain amount of stress to be able to build that resilience, but not so much that you re-traumatize yourself. And so safe relationships, I think, is the key. And, looking at finding healthier ways to cope. Like for me, in my early recovery, finding, the bottom line of all of it, the food, drugs, and alcohol were all my best attempt to soothe myself, to feel safe, to feel comforted, because I couldn't get it from my parents. They couldn't give it. They were too sick. And so recovery is about learning how to find ways to soothe yourself that are healthy, like with people, or just your own inner mindful voice, your own inner parent voice. So it really is all those things. So thanks for asking about that, Terry.
Thanks, Mary.
Who else has a question or comment? I don't know if you can raise your hand here. Let's see.
Gee, Mary, what's next?
Well, what's interesting is now that I've done this book, and it has been such a major milestone for me, I know that my next level is to work with other survivors to get their stories out there. Because to me, and I dedicate my book to this, that sharing our story is the single most powerful thing we can do to heal ourselves and heal the world. The reason I am who I am today is because of all the stories that were shared, whether it was at meetings or through books or, people modeling that recovery and thriving is possible. And so it gave me the hope and the inspiration and the tools and support I needed to do that. So I want to work with people that want to get their book done or their project or whatever their purpose is in feeling like they don't want to die with something that they know that they're meant to do in their life. And the cool thing about that is I have a 20-year marketing background, so I can kind of pull that together with all my trauma-informed coaching and help you work through all of the triggers that are, bound to come up. So yeah. Who else? Anybody else? Stacy.
Mary,
Hey,
congratulations.
thank you so much. It's great to see you.
So I got through about 100 pages of the book, and it was fabulous. Very easy read, and definitely some aha moments. So
Awesome.
I was wondering, this idea of busyness that I've used myself. Oh, I'm so busy, and I've heard other people, say they're busy. Do you think that's a trauma response? I think it's kind of like an epidemic.
Well, interesting. Carrie Zip has enlightened me about toxic intensity. And it's, to me, it's a way to keep your nervous system sort of jacked up, and you kind of feel numbed out. And it's a way to kind of check out without it being like a drug but for some, it's like an adrenaline thing. And the other piece of it is learning about how trauma survivors don't have as much, at least before they've done a lot of healing, they don't have as much access to the physical sensations in their body. And so intensity, like driving really fast or high intensity sports or being busy all the time and rushed, is a way to kind of feel alive, and to kind of feel like you have some kind of aliveness when you don't. Yeah, I mean, actually, Terry, maybe you can speak to that a little bit because you have some really good insight on it. I mean, Carrie, excuse me.
Sure. Yeah, I call toxic intensity the mother of all addictions. And I wrote about it in my own book, The Turnaround Mom.
Yes.
And it occurred to me that, what really happens is when you're brought up in that kind of intensity, you have got to repeat it. You've got to find it. We seek it out. It's what we're used to. We will seek what we're used to, our nervous systems are used to, even if that is something that's not good for us. And so using the drug or spending the money, playing checkbook roulette, rushing, speeding, texting and driving, overworking, over-promising and under-delivering, all those things keep us jacked up. And then we feel like hell about that, which only jacks us up even worse. And that's why I call it toxic intensity, because it's so horrible for us, because it spews that adrenaline and the cortisol out that rots our brains and our organs. And it's so bad for us.
Yeah.
And there's never enough of it. And so anyway, I'm going to stop with that because I know that Janelle Lawson and Jody Nelson have had their hands up, but thanks for letting me talk about it.
Well, thank you.
Toxic intensity is a big, overarching, highly accepted deal in this country, which is very sad.
And part of what I write about in the book is how to get mindful, somatically mindful, as regular mindfulness, and many different practices so that you can get really conscious of what you're up to. So who else has a question?
It's a high and a low. You seek the
Yeah.
high, but then you hit a low.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and then you get into this cycle of, for me, the way it seems to show up is like I lose time. It's like time slows down, but then it also seems lost at the same time.
Right. Well, and I think just being able to get, like in the book, when you get to part 3, where I talk about the recovery journey and really setting your goals as far as nervous system regulation goals, relationship goals, whatever they are, that's going to naturally bring forth what's in the way of that and support you in putting practices in place to gradually and gently replace the toxic intensity. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Yes, I had a question.
Yes.
This is Janelle Lawson. I know that I was very resistant when starting to enter into my trauma work, and I'm not through with it yet, but I'm just wondering, how long do you give for each thing? Because I know that your book started talking about the different the different techniques and stuff that you use, how long did you give yourself, or did you just go full in and then see if it just didn't work at all? I'm just trying to
Right.
figure out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was after I read up on all this stuff and okay, like, where do I start? At first I thought, oh, I just need to do a brain or body-based therapy and I'll be done in a couple months. Not knowing at the time that the thing about trauma is it's not just in your body and in your psychology, but it's also in your worldview, it's in your relationships. And so it's really a holistic approach. And so the best approach is to start with one baby step and take that step and then take the next baby step one day at a time and see what works and what doesn't work. In the back of the book in part 3, I have all the different, I've categorized the different types of practices and therapies, because you do want to approach the body brain part. You also want to approach the relationship part. You want to approach any addiction stuff or whatever else might be going on. And I have all the different choices that you can make. And the thing about, you have to look at trauma healing like physical fitness in a way. It's not something that, you do it for a couple of weeks and you're done and you're healed. It's a lifestyle. It really is it's a lifestyle. It's embracing a health-oriented and conscious lifestyle. And it really involves looking at the relationships are so important. And so a lot of the trauma keeps alive because of the toxic or the unfulfilling dysfunctional relationships we maintain. So it's important to take a look at that. So it's really, that's what's helpful about working with a coach or a therapist is you can look at, basically, I start with whatever is causing me the most pain in my life right now. Like for me, I couldn't start anything until I stopped drinking a 12-pack of beer a day. That was it, because obviously nothing else could happen. But anyway, so, take a look at that part of the book and reach out if you need some support. Okay, I think we're pretty much at the.
Jody has her hand.
I just had a question. Hi, great talk. I really appreciate it. You said something in the beginning and I kind of wrote it down. I didn't quite get it, but it seemed super key to me. You said something about trauma, which I have, childhood trauma and abuse. Something about you're just too busy in fight or flight, and then something, and I was like, oh my God, that seemed like so important to me. So I just wondered if you can sort of replay that, because I feel like I've lived, obviously a lot of my life in fight or flight, but it was something you said and it was key because I felt like, oh, I could turn that around.
Yeah, well, I think maybe it had to do with learning that my brain as a child developed differently than someone without trauma. The back part of the brain, the fight or flight, overdeveloped because it had to deal with the insanity at home. And the front part underdeveloped, which is attention, impulse control, emotional regulation. And it helped me make sense of why I struggled in the ways that I do. So part of the healing is to rebuild. The beauty of the brain is it's plastic. It's called neuroplasticity. And you can actually rebuild that part of your brain and calm down the fight, flight, freeze part as well. And that's all about implementing the trauma-oriented practices and healing. So yeah, for me, I'd say a good 40% of the healing is just having a freaking understanding of why I struggled in the ways I did. I mean, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder I had all these problems. It was never me. I was never bad, broken, unlovable. It's a normal response to being exposed to an abnormal environment. And this is not to say I shouldn't get help and, I should just be a crazy alcoholic. And, no, I need to take responsibility for my healing. But a big part of the pain of facing addiction and obesity is the intense shame. To me, that was just as painful as the addiction and the obesity itself. And so letting go of that, oh my God, it's like you wouldn't blame somebody for having a traumatic brain injury as a child. I mean, come on. It's the
Right.
same thing. It's a neurological injury and it needs to be treated as such. And that's why a big reason I wrote the book too. I really want to raise consciousness about this so people can stop blaming themselves, and also people can stop acting out their trauma, as you know, you can watch on the news every night. So yeah, so anyway, anyone
Thank
else? We're a little bit over. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, this has been amazing. You know, again, if it wasn't for all of my friends and colleagues, and I wouldn't have been able to do this. And so I really appreciate you all coming and showing up for me. You know, as somebody that didn't have a family that did that growing up, it means so much to me. And so if you haven't bought the book, please buy it. It's, you know, it's the Kindle is only $2.99. The paperback $17.99. And you know, it's so helpful in the first 3 days. So I'd really appreciate you supporting me with that. And also, I have a brand new website. I just redid my entire website. And it's all about all this stuff. I've got free quizzes, a free do you have complex trauma quiz. I have the ACE study quiz. I have all kinds of things on there. So go to marygiuliani.net and check it out. And again, you guys, thank you from the